Hey everyone, and welcome. Ever wonder what keeps a country's massive, complicated economy from, just flying off the rails? Well, today, we're diving into fiscal policy. Think of it as the government steering wheel, the tool it uses to navigate through choppy economic waters and hopefully guide us toward calmer seas. But what happens when that journey gets a little bumpy? What if the economic engine starts to sputter and stall out? Or, on the flip side, what if it starts redlining and threatens to overheat? This isn't just some abstract question. The answer has a very, very real impact on every single one of us. And that, right there, is where fiscal policy comes into play. Just like a really good driver, the government has a dedicated set of tools designed specifically to get the economy back on a smooth path. And understanding these tools, it's pretty much key to understanding how our world works. All right, so to really get a grip on this, let's start with the absolute basics. In this first section, we're going to get a crystal clear definition of what fiscal policy actually is, and we'll look at the pretty ambitious goals it's trying to achieve. So what is fiscal policy at the end of the day? Well, at its core, it's just how the government uses its budget, all the money it collects and all the money it spends, as a big lever to push and pull the economy in the right direction. It's one of the two main ways a country manages its financial health. And we're not talking about small goals here. The whole point is to fire up the engine for economic growth, keep the prices of everything you buy stable, create jobs for people who need them, and even try to shrink the gap between the rich and poor. It's really all about smoothing out those jarring ups and downs of the economic cycle. Okay, so we know the why. Now let's get into the how. What's actually in the government's economic toolbox? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the three main tools they have at their disposal. First up, you've got public spending. This is the government directly pumping money into the economy. So think about a new highway being built. That's not just about the road itself. It's jobs for construction crews, big orders for steel companies, and more business for local restaurants. That spending creates a huge ripple effect of economic activity. The second tool, taxation, is basically how the government pays for all that spending. Taxes on your income or on the stuff you buy do two things. One, they bring in the cash needed for public services. But two, they can be tweaked up or down to either encourage or discourage people from spending money. But what happens when the government wants to spend more that it's bringing in from taxes? Well, that brings us to tool number 3, public borrowing. To cover that gap, the government can borrow money, usually to pay for these massive long-term projects like high-speed rail that are meant to pay off for generations. So we have our tools, spending, taxing, and borrowing. Now for the really interesting part. Let's see how they're used in two completely different, high-stakes scenarios: the dreaded economic bust, or recession, and an economic boom that's getting a little too hot to handle. This slide is fantastic because it lays out the two opposing playbooks perfectly. Think of it like driving a car. In a recession, the economy is sluggish and people are losing their jobs. So what's the solution? You use expansionary policy. You hit the gas by spending more and cutting taxes to get money moving again. But in a boom, when prices are rising way too fast, you do the exact opposite. You use contractionary policy. You gently tap the brakes by cutting spending and raising taxes to cool things off. So, just to hammer this home, expansionary policy is basically the economy's first aid kit. It's all about boosting demand, getting people back to work, and breathing life back into an economy that's struggling. And on the flip side, contractionary policy is for when the party gets a little too wild. Its job is to gently turn down the music, stop prices from spiraling out of control, and bring the whole economy back to a more stable, sustainable pace. So, hit the gas, tap the brakes? Sounds simple enough, right? Well, in the real world, it's anything but. It's an incredibly complex, high-stakes balancing act, and it's filled with some serious risks and really difficult trade-offs. One of the biggest consequences of hitting that gas pedal is something called a fiscal deficit. This simple formula just shows that when government spending is higher than what it brings in through taxes, it creates a shortfall. And that shortfall has to be covered by borrowing. And yeah, that borrowing can fuel growth, but it can't go on forever. And believe me, the challenges don't stop there. Just look at this list. For one, there are huge time lags. It can take months, even years, for a policy to really kick in. Then you've got politics getting in the way of making the right economic call. And there's always the risk of borrowing way too much or even overshooting the mark and causing the very inflation you were trying to stop. And this table is great because it really helps distinguish fiscal policy from its cousin, monetary policy. Fiscal policy, remember, is run by the government using direct tools like taxes and spending, which makes it very political. Monetary policy, on the other hand, is handled by a more independent central bank, using more technical tools like interest rates. They're just two different ways of trying to get to the same goal, a stable economy. Okay, we've gone through what fiscal policy is, the tools it uses, and the serious challenges it faces. But let's bring all this right back down to earth. Why should you care about any of this high-level economic stuff in your day-to-day life? Because here's the thing, these aren't just abstract ideas. When the government decides to cut taxes, that means more money in your pocket. When it funds a huge infrastructure project, that could create your next job. These decisions directly affect the price you pay for groceries and the quality of your local schools and parks. It's truly woven into the fabric of our lives. And that really gets to the heart of it all. This quote says it perfectly. When these incredibly powerful tools are handled with wisdom and a bit of foresight, they don't just solve today's problems. They actually build the foundation for a country's long-term prosperity. And all of this leads us to one of the biggest questions out there. What is the right balance? How much or how little should the government step in? There are no easy answers here, but how we as a society choose to answer that question is what will ultimately shape the world we all live in. Thanks so much for joining us.